So, the order of speaking, there are only two folks, was determined by lot. Audrey drew number 2, which left Doug with number 1. And number 1 means that he will make his opening statement first, and the number 2 means that Audrey will make her closing statement first. The way that we do this is, and you can look down to the front and raise your hand, Donna. I have a timekeeper. What we're going to do is have 3 minutes for the opening comments, introduction of yourself, why you're here, 3 minutes for the closing, so that we can capture those things that we missed along the way, and then 2 minutes for each question. Easy question, hard question, 2 minutes. So the timekeeper, who's the woman down there, Donna Nelson, Donna will keep time. She will have a sign that lets you know when you have 1 minute left. I think that's a green sign. She has a yellow sign saying you have 30 seconds left, and a red sign saying stop. So pay attention to Donna to the degree that you need to. The questions will be asked back and forth. So what's going to happen, it's going to look a little bit awkward in a way, but after Doug makes his opening comment, and then Audrey makes her, I hope you guys don't mind if I call you by your first names. Okay. Audrey makes her opening comment, then the first question will go to Audrey. So you kind of go twice in a row, okay? Just so that you know. I think that most of the audience now knows that we do not take questions from the audience. We have all our questions come through the moderator. The moderator has many assistants sitting at the table up there on the way in. So if you have a question, raise your hand with your question in it. We will have far more questions than we have time to answer. So what we try to do is put the questions together. One answer from each person on a certain topic. I would like you to check your phones, make sure your phones are off. Everybody got that? I would like you to check your hats, make sure your hats are off. I would like to tell you that there are bathrooms, and the bathrooms are out through the doors that way. I don't do right and left very well. I could introduce all the ladies from the league, but I think you'll figure out who they are. They're the ones scurrying around with white cards in their hand. So, but special thanks up here in the front to Emily, who's doing Facebook Live for us, to Donna and Patty, who are doing the timing. Now, you have seen probably several cameras and several people with photo equipment. 1224 Action News is here. The Shasta County Arts Council is here. The Shasta County Arts Council is doing the Facebook Live, and they will be posting things on YouTube. Everything will be available from them at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Audrey Denney's videographer is here. Doug LaMalfa's videographer is here. Nevada County Media is here, and this is a group that used to be known as Nevada County TV, so thank you for joining us. We have photographers and reporters from Chico, from Siskiyou County. So we have quite a bit of coverage, but I want you to remember that this district, District 1, is a very large district. This district covers, and I'm sure you all know this, Butte County, Lassen County, Modoc County, Plumas County, where I understand you all will be tomorrow, Shasta County, Sierra County, Siskiyou County, and Tehama County. Most of Nevada County and part of Glenn County and part of Placer County. It is a very large district, and we're honored that we can have this event here. I would like to remind you that the League of Women Voters is really about civil discourse. We're about educating the public. Somebody said, why didn't you put these two wonderful candidates at opposite ends of the stage at their own podiums? And I said, because I believe in civil discourse, and if they can't sit next to each other, I don't know, you know. I mean, honestly, So I'm expecting the same from you. We're all here because we want to hear what they have to say. I can run this, and I have run these before, lickety-split. I can move through these questions really fast. I need your support to do that. No clapping, no hissing, no booing, no nothing, no waving things, no jumping up and down. Stay in your seats, listen, hear what they have to say. Does that work for you two?
Works great.
Yeah.
Okay. And on that note, let's get started. So, this would be the last clapping. Just saying the last clapping. Doug, would you please go ahead?
May I, before we start,
Yes.
Ms. Denney and I, we came up with a bipartisan resolution. Can we ask that those lights be turned down about 30%?
I was wondering if you might feel that way. I'm a little beleaguered by the lights myself. And
no,
there goes Lewis. He's got us covered. Thank you, Lewis.
Y'all can still see us, right? So, all right, that improves a lot.
It's going to be hard on the camera people because they were all set to go, but
Well, they can run for Congress then, huh? All right. All right, go. All right, well, thank you. I'm Doug LaMalfa from Richvale, California. I'm really thankful to the league and for this format, for making the effort to put this together and finding a venue that would fit just about everybody. This worked pretty well. And also thank all of you for taking your time on Sunday afternoon and come be part of the civic process. Really appreciate it and hope to have a good informative discourse here. So first, let me, as we have all observed and lived and people here locally, this was a terrible summer for fire and it's still going on. We're probably only mid-season the way it goes. I just want to really commend the way the people of this community, this area, this region, this district come together in that time of crisis with their first responders, but as neighbors. And we've seen that in just manyfold in how people have helped each other and supported each other. You know, even on our trips coming up here to see what's going on, and you just see that. And people are so generous here that I know both of us have brought supplies up here to be helpful. And I think after a while they got tired of people bringing drinks and such because there's so much generosity around here and such. So, and we got to do better than that with how our fire is so susceptible in these forested areas. But my hat's off to all of you and the great way this community pulls together. And we saw it also with what the administration has done, sending 3 different secretaries of different departments out. Kirsten Nielsen from Homeland Security, check it out on FEMA, as well as Secretary Perdue from Department of Ag and Secretary Zinke from Interior, that are going to bring different policy to fight the fire, but also prevent the fire with better forestry practices. So with that, you know me, you know what I stand for and have stood for, and I've kept the promises that I've made to you of what I said I would do when I ran for office. And we know what those things are. It's about putting the power back in your hands, not in the hands of the government. I'm not a big government guy. I'm really one that doesn't want to see more control go to Washington, D.C. or for Sacramento, for that matter. I'd rather it stay locally in your hands with decisions, with what you earn, with what your ideas for investing. You know, we hear government talk about we want to invest. Well, I want you to invest. And so, because you're going to make better decisions for your family. So what I don't think we need is a bigger, more powerful, more centered in Washington, D.C. socialist government. We want the power to be back here where you can make your own decisions. So thank you for coming today. I look forward to the questions.
thank you, Doug. Audrey?
Is there something weird going on with the audio? Is it just me? I gotta stand up. I'm a teacher. Does this work? So thank you all for being here today. It's a truly amazing crowd, and a huge, huge thank you to the League of Women Voters. But I want to take my opening statement to tell you a story. And this is a story, one of the first stories that I learned on the campaign trail. And this is the story about the water saga that has been happening in the Klamath Basin. For decades and decades, diverse stakeholders in the Klamath Basin has been fighting over water. And this really came to a head in 2001 when it got national news attention. And over the period of about 5 years, these diverse stakeholder groups came together and formed an agreement. Farmers and ranchers, Native American tribes, commercial fishermen, environmental protection groups, and local government all came together to form this agreement. And it wasn't a perfect agreement for everyone. Everyone got something, but not everybody got everything they wanted. And in the course of this process, they learned something. And these formerly warring parties learned that the people who were sitting across the aisle from them weren't that different from them after all. Right? They learned that they all cared about their families, and they cared about the land, and they cared about the river. And so in 2010, 39 diverse stakeholder groups came together and signed the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement. And then all that was needed at this time was Congress to pass legislation to implement that locally produced solution. But Representative LaMalfa failed to pass that legislation before the deal expired at the end of 2015. And now, up in the Klamath Basin, we're losing fifth-generation family farms. And our Native American tribes and our farmers are back in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals litigating water rights. Folks, Congressman LaMalfa has failed us on this. And for me, this story is emblematic of the plight of our district, right? All across our district, we have local community leaders who are working hard to solve our problems. They're working hard to make our forests healthy, to make our school system better so our kids can get good jobs. They're working hard to make sure we have access to rural health care. And as your congresswoman, I'm not going to have all of the solutions to all of our local problems, and nor should I, right? Solutions to local problems shouldn't be handed down from the federal government. You in this audience, you, the community members, have those solutions. All we need is a representative who will act as a partner, who will walk alongside our communities and connect us to the national resources that we need to implement our local solutions. I am Audrey Denney. I'm an educator, I'm a farmer, and it'll be the honor of my life to be that leader for you.
Thank you, Audrey. Just stay right there.
Stand and I get the first question.
The first question. So the first question has to be about the car fire. Would you all agree? Yeah, I think you would. What are your ideas for recovery effects because of the car fire? And I want you to think about this in big terms like water resources, air resources. I mean, the air has been almost unbreathable, as you know. So talk to us.
So I don't need to, for the people in this room, I don't need to talk to you about the devastation that you've experienced this summer already. And we have to continue to support FEMA in doing emergency relief. We have to continue to support the Small Business Administration, making sure we get loans back to you to get back on your feet. But folks, the way that we recover from this is we make sure it never happens again. I'm looking out here and I see at least 6 people I know in this room that have lost everything. And those people say we have to make our forests healthy so this doesn't happen again. And the congressman might tell us that it's environmentalists or it's red tapes that are making us so vulnerable. But the fact of the matter is our forests are so unhealthy and these ecosystems are so unhealthy because of a complex system of factors. The answer to making our forests healthy we have locally, because our Klamath forests look different. The Karuk tribe has an amazing integrated natural resource plan up there. The folks up in Quincy have the Quincy Library Group and their plan for making their forest healthy. What we need is streamlined federal funding, but local controlled solutions, and we need to increase the pace and the scale of collaboration. If we continue at our current rate of restoring 500,000 or 250,000 acres a year, we're in trouble, right? There's 6 million acres of forest that need to be managed right in the Sierra Nevadas alone. And so by using innovative integrated models like they're doing in Tuolumne County with a master stewardship agreement with the U.S. Forest Service, we can rapidly increase the pace and the scale of these management efforts to make sure that this doesn't keep happening.
Thank you so much. Doug, same question.
Sure. Well, we know the short-term problems are to help people immediately recover from the devastation they've lived with here in this Shasta County area, where we have
three fires converging. I mean, how maddening is this with the Carr fire, the Hers fire, and then the Delta fire, shutting down I-5 for several days at a time. That's an incredibly important artery from the Mexico border to the Canadian border. I mean, how can we have this happen for much longer? It's devastating to the economy and inconvenient for everybody that has to be rerouted through Bernie and McLeod and wherever else. So that said, in the short term, we need to find solutions, working with FEMA, helping people get back on their feet immediately. Unfortunately, with what it takes to get permits and find land sometimes to build new homes, or what it takes to clear off the properties that have been burned, people might be displaced for a year, maybe a year and a half. Now, some of your leaders from the city of Anderson approached me about an issue they need to have help resolving. If we can get this done, if we can help with some USDA grant money on this particular issue, we can have already available lots that have been vacant since 2008 with the downturn in the economy, kickstart right away and get people probably 6 to 8 months in their homes sooner by using some of these undeveloped lots and kickstarting the process. That's one small part of it. But big picture, long term, we're not managing the forest the way we need to do it all. Now, in Congress, you're going to see some phony billboards and stuff that says certain things, but actually we increased the budget to U.S. Forest Service so they can do their activities. We also separated out the emergency funding they need, because they are having to draw from their everyday funds to do the emergency funding for fire suppression. They've been fighting for that for quite a while. Myself and bipartisan effort with Mr. Garamendi and Senator Feinstein finally were able to get through legislation and funding so their emergency funds doesn't gobble up all their day-to-day operational funds that would do timber harvest and permitting, et cetera. So the long-term solution lies getting out in the forest and getting the job done of thinning.
Thank you. Doug, stay up there. The next question is, how are you and your team working to capture the votes of younger people? And we're defining younger in this group as 30 years or less.
It still comes down to opportunity that this country stands for, has always stood for. Liberty, individual choices to do what it is you want to do with your time, with your investment. And it would be sure nice if they didn't have to come out, if they chose to go through college, a 4-year degree, or longer, or less, with this choking debt they have to deal with that basically hampers their ability to get started in life. If they want to go on and invest in a small business, or they get married and soon want to buy a home, they have this choking debt around their neck that it doesn't help. And so what happens? Well, we can give more Pell Grants, we can do more loans, but we find the universities are jacking up the rates in unison with the more availability of credit. So we got to do something to address the actual cost of going to school, going to college or trade school or whatever it is that the student chooses to do. So they have options to come out and they're not intimidated by the price of going to begin with. That would be extremely helpful. Congress was able to do legislation just 3-4 years ago to kind of tweak the price of financing on that, but it isn't enough. We need to get that price down more, but we also need universities to be responsible for addressing what students really need in the areas, in the courses they need to go out and be competitive in the broad world there. So with that, I'm all about what America's about, with opportunity. I don't think people really need to have their hand held and all that. They just need to have the equal opportunity. For those that need a little bit of hand up and a boost, we're there for it with some of the financing and things like that help. But they need to have something to come home to. That's why I'm fighting, so that in our rural communities, we have a timber industry, we have a mining industry, we have something that they can come home to instead of having to leave our small towns in this district, like I'm from, like Redding's a small town, Anderson's a small town. We want them to have the opportunity here, not have to go somewhere else in a high rent area where they're not going to be happy. That's the opportunity.
Thank you. Audrey, same question.
And it was how we're getting young people involved? Yes. Okay. Doing that by 3 ways. By talking about the things that they care about. Student debt, jobs, the environment, climate change. First way. Second way, giving them ownership in the process. Ownership in their actual democracy, right? We've got 8 college interns this semester. We had 7 last semester, and they're responsible for rolling out all of our youth engagement strategies, all of our voter registration strategies. We're meeting them where they are, where we can find them, at voter registration bar crawls. We're showing up to where they are to engage them in the process. Folks, in the third way is we're reminding them that they actually have a chance to make a difference. They're disillusioned and they're disenfranchised because they feel like they don't matter. They feel like they don't exist. But when we walk up to them and we prove to them that their vote matters, that their voice matters, because this election is going to come down to a couple thousand votes, and they could be those votes, man, that gets them excited. And then we find ourselves in situations where I found myself a couple weeks ago, where I got a second $1,000 donation to my campaign from a downtown Chico bartender who had to pull money out of coffee cans that he had stashed around his house because he believes in this mission. He believes in what we're doing. He believes every single person is inherently equal in worth and dignity, which is what this campaign is about. So we're getting people involved, we're getting young people involved by reminding them that they matter. And I see a lot of young people in the crowd today because of that.
Thank you. Hold on to that microphone. I must say there are about 5 young people sitting right outside the store right here. Okay, keeping it local, do you support raising Shasta Dam and building additional dams to store water?
If raising the Shasta Dam would make it rain more, I'd be all for it. As it is, the 18.5-foot raising would cost $1.3 billion and yield us 51,000 more acre feet for water deliveries. That's 0.7% of the annual water deliveries from the Central Valley Project. And to put that in perspective, that amount, 8 times that amount of water was saved in 3 months in the summer of 2015 by urban water users. Raising the Shasta Dam is a colossal waste of taxpayer resources. It's against the California state law. It violates the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and it would submerge some really, really important cultural heritage sites for the Winnemem-Wintu tribe. Other projects that I would definitely support. Folks, we are looking down the pipe at climate change. We need more storage. We need off-stream storage. Sites Reservoir, while there is no perfect place to put a new reservoir, Sites Reservoir would get us 800,000 acre feet per year and build in flexibility into our water system. As our snowpack's gonna start melting at different times with climate change, we need more storage. But we also need to focus on recycling. We need to look at desalination. That word is really hard to say. We need to look at how managing our land, how managing our forests affects groundwater recharge. It's a complex, important system. We absolutely need more storage, but raising the Shasta Dam isn't the right answer.
Thank you. Doug, same question.
Shasta and Sites. Well, I've been a longtime advocate of building Sites Reservoir, and finally we're turning the corner with you, the voters. By and large, have supported the Proposition 1A, that was just a few years ago to fund. Finally, we've the State Water Commission has put forward $900 million to finally kickstart that. That's not that much money in context of a lot of other things that the voters would support or haven't supported, such as this doggone high-speed rail, which would cost $100 billion. But that said, let's keep going forward on Sites Reservoir. And I helped pass legislation in Washington, D.C. to facilitate that and to keep moving forward. So I'm optimistic we're going to see something happen with that in actual moving of dirt and bulldozers and things of that nature. On the raise of Shasta Dam, what I've listened to is the locals say that if this happens, please look out for our local interests. And the money's already been put aside to get started on that. They're up there drilling core samples in the dam to make sure that it has the integrity to raise that. Now, conceptually, we need more water storage everywhere. But if this project is going to happen with 18.5 more feet, which would actually cause 600,000 more acre feet to be storable there, you know, that's, some people believe, one of the easiest projects you can do. But what I'm concerned about is what does it mean to the locals around the lake as well? The people that own property, the people that have the resorts and the marinas and all that are an important part of the local economy. And so we've met, we've talked about this, and I've gotten assurance from important folks at the Bureau of Reclamation and higher up that they're going to be made whole should this come to ultimate fruition, so that they have an opportunity to be in business at the higher level, at a new location, whatever it is in their particular situation, because this is a very important local economic structure, okay? So if we have additional water, it really doesn't benefit us up here per se. But what it does do, if we build Sites Reservoir, if we have more in Shasta, it takes the pressure off of us when there is a drought to come after the water we already have in a lesser number and have them come take it from us. So, thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Audrey?
Well, I do.
Oh, no, Doug, you got another question. I'm off kilter here. Okay, what are your thoughts on, we're going to talk about the Postal Service here. So several different things. Restoring the solvency of the Postal Service, restoring local overnight mail delivery, keeping our rural post offices open and not closing them. You know, I mean, when we have to run all our mail through Sacramento, it's certainly a delay. And the inconvenient hours, well, and retaining 6-day delivery. And is it even a practical idea, all these things?
Well, it's been practical for many, many years, hasn't it? Now, what is the, you told me to stay in the light here. Okay.
Yes, I did.
It's worked for many, many years. Now, obviously, we do have higher energy costs and other things that cost more to deliver the mail, but we also need to be looking at the structure of what is the pricing of that. Is Amazon getting too cheap of a deal to deliver their stuff? Are book rates and others for heavy packages? I think those structures are too low in price. The first-class mail more or less is a break-even or a slight profit. So let's adjust what it is to have it be like any other enterprise, because you sure don't have FedEx or UPS or anybody else that delivers doing it at a loss. They have it figured out on whatever their package is, whatever their size is, to be profitable. That's what they have to do. Every one of us, when we leave the house each day to go to our respective jobs, we hope to come home with a little more than what we left with. That's what earning is about. So the post office needs to be freed up to be able to do that. They also have a very onerous retirement package that requires 75 years worth of looking out into the future on that, which is unique to any other federal issue. So we've talked with many of the postal workers about that, and it's hard to get things through Congress sometimes, but we have to endeavor to make the Postal Service be able to continue to work in that manner, because it is extremely important in communities like ours and districts like this, which we have dozens of post offices in every little burg up and down each county. And, you know, they used to be kind of a meeting place. You go get your mail in the morning, you see your friend, and maybe go have coffee at the cafe, but it's kind of a central communication point. You see who's having a yard sale, who lost a dog. Those are just the kind of little things that are the things that don't get talked about as much, but the importance of the post office and having that. Because, you know, I got to give them credit. And, you know, people like to make fun sometimes, but the idea you can drop by one little stamp and drop a letter in, and it's going to go all the way across the country in just a few days. Now, the closing of the regional centers here, bad idea, because having it all funnel through Sacramento has slowed down our delivery by 2 to 3 days, and we especially see that at campaign time, right? So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Audrey?
So the Postal Service was one of the things when I launched this campaign that I knew nothing about. I knew that it was the only place that I could go in and pay money to walk out with nothing, but that was basically the extent of my postal system knowledge. And then I met a woman named Ruth on the second day. I know a lot of you in here know Ruth, but on the second day after I announced my campaign, she had me on the cell phone and she was running me through everything I needed to know. And by getting to know her, I have learned, folks, that our postal employees are some of the most overworked and underpaid and underappreciated folks who work for the federal government. And we absolutely need to be investing in personnel resources, but also investing in system resources. The increasing competition that the congressman mentioned by places like FedEx and UPS is really, really challenging, and it's challenging our post office. Making sure that we elect a representative who doesn't take corporate donations from entities like FedEx and UPS, I think is important. But I also think it's really important to make sure that we're innovative and we're creative when we think outside the box. In terms of things like postal banking, where in our rural communities, when we're so remote rural, we don't have the opportunities to have banks. If our post offices could also act as with some banking services, that would add more solvency to the institution, that would give our local communities more access to things that they need. And so I think it's absolutely an issue that we all need to be paying more attention to. I know it's not the first thing that comes to mind when you think about issues facing the district, but it's a very, very important one. And I'd like to just give a shout out to all the hardworking people at the post office, especially Ruth. So thank you.
Thank you. And your next question is about immigration. We knew that one would come up.
Yeah.
What ideas do you have to solve the immigration situation at the Mexican border?
So our immigration system is completely out of alignment. We have federal laws that contradict state laws that make challenges for our local law enforcement. And this is a complex problem, and we've been trying to get bipartisan immigration reform passed since George W. Bush was president. Folks, the congressman had 10 years in the state legislature and 6 years in DC to be part of the solution to this problem, but he hasn't been. He's been part of the problem. And we need a secure border. We need protections for our agricultural workers. We need to make sure that asylum seekers have the chance to go through the rule of law process to see if they actually qualify for asylum. And we need to make sure our law-abiding immigrants who live in this country are taken care of as they continue to invest in our economy. Send me to Washington, D.C., and let me help be part of the solution to this problem.
Thank you. Doug?
If you don't have a sovereign border that's enforced, you don't really have a nation, do you? So what does it take? We have the need to have whatever mechanisms it takes to have a secure border, both borders and our coast. So what that means on the southern border, which is usually the topic of conversation, is that some combination of whatever you want to call it, fence, wall, patrols, technology, surveillance that would keep our border secure. But you know what we have in those fences? We have gates with well-oiled hinges that welcome people that want to immigrate legally, that want to seek work permits legally. If we don't have legal immigration, again, we have nothing, and we have chaos. And so to do anything other than that means we can do amnesty after amnesty. I'm not in favor of that. But if we don't first secure the border, then it really is just a sieve that is unmanageable. And it's not good for the immigrants as well. If they don't have legal paperwork, and you know, I'm in agriculture, so I hear that a lot as well. They need a labor workforce to do what needs to be done. There isn't the numbers of people that either want to do that work or are willing to do that work. That ties into some other issues. But that said, it's so much better for people to have legal paperwork to come and do the work that needs to be done, and then have that free access going back across the border where likely their families would be. That's a good way of doing business, because right now what those illegal immigrants are subject to is horrendous. With the coyotes, the things that happen to women that would come across the border are unspeakable. And so why do we continue to foster a policy that allows this? Yes, I've been fighting all my years to try and get a legal process, documented workers, and a secure border, and everything else takes care of itself from there.
Thank you. Audrey?
I already did that one.
Oh, you did that one. Okay. The next one, Doug. First of all, yes or no, are you concerned about the federal deficit being over $1 trillion? And second, depending on how you look at this, how do you think that we can address that as a Congress?
Don't spend more than you take in. That's what we have to ultimately achieve here. Yes, it's a great concern that we're somewhere around 21 trillion, well, 20 plus trillion dollars in deficit. I mean, how many zeros is there in a trillion? It's ridiculous. So, but when we are in DC putting together budgets and appropriations, there's two sides to every issue there. We've had some good fortune to lower the deficit in an individual budget year by quite a bit, but then some of the put off spending or put off reforms start kicking in and the number wraps back up. And so we're in a bad way on that. So my deal is I don't want to leave to next generations this continued deficit spending. And we can work our way out of that by this strong, robust economy we're seeing right now. 4.2% GDP, I understand one of the Federal Reserve units thinks it's going to be 4.7. We're seeing unemployment as low as it's been since the summer of love, right? Back in the late 60s. And so we have the indicators and the things going in the right direction to have the strong economy. If we can hold the line on spending, we will finally meet that goal of no more deficit spending in individual budget years, and then we start eating into that horrendous national debt, because that's a terrible legacy to leave for our next generations. And if we see an increase in the interest rates by any significant number, then the cost to service that debt will eclipse pretty much the rest of the discretionary part of the budget we have. We won't be able to do the things we normally ask our federal government to do because they're paying off debt service. We have to tackle this. So a strong economy is going to help us get out of that. Putting the dollars back in the pockets of small businesses, of people, of families, instead of having to struggle to try and make payments, they can then invest and do what they see as fit, and that makes our economy go, and that puts dollars into the coffers at fair rates of tax, not just increasing taxes.
Thank you. Audrey, same question.
Couldn't agree with the Congressman more. Absolutely, absolutely the deficit is a problem. What's especially a problem to me is the $1.5 trillion we added to that deficit because of the tax plan that was passed last year. The fact of the matter is, folks, the Congressman and I agree on the way to make this happen. We have to restore fairness to the tax code. The tax plan that went through was a massive, massive tax giveaway to the richest among us and corporations. They were supposed to create more jobs with that money. They were supposed to invest, but they bought back their own stocks. They didn't increase workers' wages. The people around here, we're not feeling this supposed booming economy. We are struggling. A quarter of the people in this district, and I'm assuming in this room, rely on Social Security to make their ends meet. The tiny, tiny amount of Social Security that you get. And Republican leadership in the House has already said that passing this tax bill to address this new $1.5 trillion added onto the deficit, they're going to cut your Social Security benefits and your Medicare benefits. It's already been said. Folks, we have to restore fairness into the tax code. They threw us a bone with the tax bill. I mean, you'll hear the number, maybe $2,000 for the average Californian family. But the fact of the matter is, corporations and the richest among us took home the whole cow. And we have to restore fairness to the tax code. That's how we attack the deficit.
Thank you. Hold on a second. There are 2 empty seats in here. There's one up here, and there's one in the back. Could you raise your hand, the one in the back up there? So let's find 2 people who really need to sit down who are out there in that audience. One up here and one in the back. And one over here. So that's 3. Thank you. Okay, Audrey.
Down and to the right, we've got one. Or your right, my left. Stage left?
No, I don't know. That way.
Theater was never my thing.
That way. You like the pointing, huh? So, veterans, big issue. Disabled veterans and veterans. I mean, not every veteran is a disabled veteran. What are we going to do to support those veterans?
You'll be hard-pressed to find an issue closer to my heart than veterans issues. Couldn't be more proud of my dad. He's a Vietnam vet at age 19. He was accepted to 2 different colleges, but he signed up to go to Vietnam. He was shot down twice in the line of duty. He earned 43 Air Medals of Valor and a Distinguished Flying Cross for meritorious service. And folks, it took him 36 years to get all of his benefits. 36 years because of the backlog. He's 100% disabled. 70% of that is with PTSD. And the life-saving services of the Veterans Administration is the reason that I still have him. And it is my core belief that we have to provide our servicemen and women support when they come home. We have to train them again how to be civilians. We have to help them get jobs, make sure they find housing. We have to make sure that their mental health care is just as important as their physical health care, so we can make a difference on the horrifying veteran suicide statistics that we see. 22 a day. We don't do this. We don't do this by privatizing the VA. We do it by fully funding and fully staffing the VA and making sure that new innovative programs to train our servicemen and women how to re-engage in civilian society are there. I commend the Congressman's efforts on getting us new VA facilities in the district, and I hope to see much more of that in Congress in the future. But folks, patriotism doesn't belong to one political party. We all in this room are patriots, and I'm so grateful for the veterans and the servicemen and women in this room. So thank you.
Thank you.
No clapping.
You'll make Susan mad. They don't care, but I care. Doug, same question.
Well, for me, I was 8 years as a state legislator where we had little say in doing that, in doing anything to help our veterans on a meaningful way. But as a federal one, when we took office, immediately we jumped to work. My staff does stellar work on helping individual cases. We have a lot of cases where probably 50% of our calls to our district offices have to do with a veteran trying to seeking help and trying to get through the maze that a lot of times is the VA. Now, the VA serves a lot of people very well, but when you hear about the backlogs and the phony numbers and the long waits and the phony wait lines and all that sort of thing, we know a lot more needs to be done. I think we're moving in the right direction. The Veterans Choice Act is something we passed to say, you know, veterans, we understand you don't want to wait in line wait for months to get an appointment because you're having chest pains. That's kind of an immediate issue, all right? And so we don't want you to have to travel. Some of them, like up in Siskiyou County, will have to get on a bus at 3 or 4 in the morning, a van, and go all the way down to Martinez or someplace to get a simple checkup, a simple test of some sort, instead of being able to do it locally. The Veterans Choice Act gives them the option, and we've been able to force actually being able to use it. So you can go to your locals and get that test done to get that immediate attention. But still use the VA when you want to. So we've increased the funding to VA. We have sought to put newer facilities in, but you know what you really need? You can have a building, but you have to have doctors in it. And that's where they've been lagging, is hiring the doctors, hiring the staff it takes to actually serve the veteran. You know, I had one case that my staff, again, they're stellar on helping get this done, but a Shasta County veteran that had waited 30 years to get attention on this. I finally had to personally walk his paperwork to Washington, D.C. because it wasn't getting through Oakland, where they were losing stuff and piling it in a file in the basement. And when I took it to Washington, D.C., I had to take not 1, but 2, but 3 stops to get somebody to accept the paperwork. And this is from a congressman, for crying out loud. A lot more needs to be done because our veterans deserve it. Thank you.
Okay, hang in there. The next question is about healthcare, and actually I'm going to ask you 2 or 3 questions about healthcare, but this one is, how do we develop a healthcare plan that is affordable to all? What can we do?
Well,
And I want you to think about medications, physicians, special services, all those things.
Well, all means a lot of different things depending on your income level, right? And so it depends on what the particular person's needs. Some have much lesser needs, some have greater need. So in order to try and somehow level that playing field, what doesn't get talked about much is what drives the cost of medical service. We don't talk about that much. Instead, we're trying to paper it over with government funding, some sort of, whether it's government-issued insurance or what have you. And I don't think that's the way to go. What we've seen with Obamacare is that the promises of $2,500 per family instead saw most people's premiums that had insurance over double. That's not success. We see doctors and other people that are in the healthcare providing field get so discouraged that they retire, they drop out of the field. How are we going to get new doctors to come into the business there when they spend more time doing paperwork and hassling with that stuff instead of being able to see the patient. And that's what the patient wants, is a personal relationship with their doctor, so they actually know them from visit to visit what's going on with them. So it isn't going to be the government through single payer, if you want to call it that, or Medicare for all, because we're seeing that hasn't been the solution with Obamacare. We need to get back to that doctor-patient relationship and a streamlined process for people to pay for their health care with insurance they choose, with choices that they can afford. For young people, they want probably just basic bare bones coverage. But everybody also has a responsibility to buy health insurance. I don't think we use the club of government to force people into buying it and penalize them if they don't. But we need to incentivize them that they have an opportunity to buy low-cost insurance. And then if your family has that, as you're raised in that, and then when you become adult, you take that responsibility and buy it for yourself, you don't have to worry about this pre-existing condition come in as a new insurance buyer, because if everybody stays in the stream, you have insurance coverage that covers you all the way through. But we have remedies also on pre-existing conditions we'll talk about later.
Thank you. Audrey?
So as a young person, is 34 still young? I think 34 is still young. I would be dead now if I hadn't had good health insurance. 3 weeks ago, my doctor discovered a tumor the size of a football on my ovary, and I had to have almost emergency surgery to have it removed. If I had decided not to COBRA my health insurance when I stopped working to run, I would have been bankrupt. Folks, 2/3 of bankruptcies in our country are medical in nature. Most of the people in this room are one health crisis away from losing absolutely everything, and I feel that on a visceral level now. Representative LaMalfa has voted to take away our access. He's voted to destabilize the insurance markets so premiums keep going higher. And he's voted to restrict Medicaid, which so many people in our district rely on. Solution that we start working on the day I get to Washington is making sure we stop the partisan attacks on the Affordable Care Act to make sure we can stabilize those markets and bring those premiums down. Is the ACA perfect? No, far from it. Too many people aren't covered. Insurance premiums are still out of control. I was talking to a farmer in Scott Valley who has to pay $4K a month to insure his family. That's outrageous. There's a lot that we have to do, but we have to be driving towards a system where everyone is covered, where people don't go bankrupt, and where we get the quality of care we need. And that starts with holding insurance companies accountable for providing all 10 of our essential healthcare benefits, providing guaranteed issuance, making sure everybody gets it, protecting us from pre-existing conditions limiting our health care. Folks, those are the things we need to happen at a federal level, and I really hope we get a rural health question because we've got a lot of ideas around that too. But the fact of the matter is we need health care, we need affordable health care, everyone needs it, and we need it now.
Okay, hang on to that.
No clapping.
So we have,
I got you, Susan.
I like this lady. No clapping.
I like rules.
Okay, so we know that the United States has an opioid epidemic going on. Mm-hmm. How can Congress help states and local communities address that epidemic?
Yeah. So important. Folks, I was up in Modoc County, and I was meeting with the undersheriff up there, and he told me his 44-bed jail is completely full of people who need treatment, who need addiction treatment, who need mental health treatment that shouldn't be there, right? Modoc County, Alturas is set with it's got generational poverty and generational addiction. And we need to treat it like the public health crisis that it is. All of our current policies focus on the aftermath of this epidemic, but we need to be looking at the prevention, right? Also in Modoc County, I was meeting with a superintendent of schools, and he told me that he had kids coming into transitional kindergarten at age 5 that had already been verbally, physically, and sexually abused by addicted parents, by parents who are suffering. And the community, in the form of the school, has to come in and has to take care of those kids and make sure that they can become productive members of our society, right? But in order to do that, that superintendent needed to hire a caseworker. He needed to hire a psychologist. And the secure rural schools funding we had didn't give him the flexibility to do that. So there's a lot we can do, making sure that we protect Medicaid, where so many of our residents get addiction treatment, get mental health treatment through, making sure our federally qualified healthcare centers are up to snuff, and really, really making sure that we're working to untangle the snarl of addiction issues, mental health issues, and adverse childhood experiences.
Thank you. Doug?
The House of Representatives lately has passed several pieces of legislation targeting this opioid problem. Indeed, it's a scourge on all of our society, but especially prevalent here in the North State as well. And so if we can allow these programs to work and see the results on that, then I think we can see these numbers start to go down. They're not just numbers, they're people, we know that. And so we had a recent opportunity to go up to Plumas County, where they have an innovative program there, their local officials there, that the problem they started with was a horrendous amount of people with opioid addictions, the number of overdoses, the percentages are just beyond belief what they're dealing with up there. But they're innovating up there in Plumas County, and it could serve as a model for a lot of other areas, because what it is rural concerns. It's a lot harder to get and deliver rural health services because you know the dynamics. Strengthened rural economies is a big part of that, having the dollars flow back where they used to come from. We talk about secure rural schools where, that's actually, unfortunately, a government program that is replacing the timber industry. Now we're watching all this timber burn up everywhere. That industry used to put the money in the pipeline to help local governments operate and provide opportunity for people to be employed instead of being home depressed, where they turn to drugs like this, where you see domestic violence. So all these things are interrelated. All of them are intertwined. But what we've passed in the House of Representatives, along with a really good mental health bill a couple years ago, as these flower, we hope to see the results. But obviously in the short term, it's still difficult. So we have to continue the battle. And there's also the balance there where way too many opioids are being prescribed. It's so easy to get that it's ripe with abuse. But on the other hand, we have to make sure people that actually need them and deserve them do get them. So there's a balance there.
Thank you. Where am I? Doug, next question. We're still on the medical stuff. So currently in Chico, no general practitioners or pediatricians are taking new patients. My allergist just announced she's retiring. There are no other allergists in the area taking patients. What can the Congress do to help states, local areas, fix the doctor and nurse shortage that we're experiencing in Northern California, for sure, in your district, but also in other districts in the United States?
Well, a very short answer is make doctoring fun again. I mean, with the onerous regulations that people have been in the medical industry have had dumped upon them with coding and all the different paperwork they have to keep track of on, instead of talking to the patient, they're looking down at a piece of paper the whole time. And the regulatory load that doctors feel doesn't make it where they really want to be in the field. You see early retirements. So let's put the incentive back in to want to be part of the field so we have the doctors and the nurses. And that's part of what we did with the American Health Care Act, is to release some of the onerous, difficult regulations that cause them to not want to be in the field. That's really number one, because if you don't have new doctors coming in, going through many years of medical school and practice, then we're going to be in a bad way. And so for nurses, they can be very well paid, but if they don't want to get into the field because of nursing shortages and the difficulty it is to have enough staff to do the job, then we're not going to be successful. So we have to incentivize. We have to make it where they want to come into the field, and that the regulatory load upon them, the cost of doing business, the cost of going to college and going to medical school. We keep having to address that once again because it's a deterrent for people to want to enter the field. So we've had, locally, we've worked with local issues to be able to have what was called the federally qualified community health centers and the teaching health centers, which is a graduate medical program, to have people come back into our rural areas and learn their way locally. And this really helps the rural healthcare system a lot. We've worked closely with that, and we've had very grateful partners in that with establishing and strengthening that. We've had that legislation a couple of times since I've been there to go through and keep it funded and keep incentivizing it. So that's how we're going to help on the rural end, but it really comes down to the federal government doesn't have the answer. It's going to come back from people being incentivized to want to get into the field.
Thank you. Audrey?
Oh, yeah, rural health. I had to go to Oregon to get my tumor taken out, and I live in Chico. What? That's crazy. Our entire district is a health professional shortage area. You can look on a map. It's all purple. Most of it is a medically underserved area. The congressman mentioned one program that's great. There's a bunch of already existing programs through the Rural Health Administration that have student loan forgiveness for doctors. They've got the Nurse Service Corps that encourages nurses to work in rural areas. We can let nurses operate at the top of their fields doing more. We can train community workers to be community care workers. We can train up our EMTs to do prevention work and not just respond to crises. But folks, for me, the root of this issue is the people who live in our beautiful part of the world, we live here for a reason, right? We love it up here. We want to create communities where our kids want to come back and work. Kids want to come back and live. And so if we're working to create those communities, and we identify early on, we invest in primary STEM education. So we pick out kids who are excited about science and technology and engineering and math, and we say, hey, have you thought about the medical field? Let's send you to undergrad. Let's help pay for your undergrad. Let's help make sure your student loans are forgiven. And then you come back and you serve in the rural community where you came from for 10 years. These are kids. Our kids want to come back here. They want to live in the communities that they were raised in. If we're working to make these communities safe and vibrant communities, and we're identifying them and investing in them early, those are the kind of things that are going to, in the long term, help us make sure that we're not a health professional shortage area.
Thank you. Just a comment before we go to the next question. Somebody complained about the phone that's going off. It's not actually the phone, it's actually the timer. So just to say I can't fix that.
If we keep our answers to under 2 minutes, though.
If we keep our answers, that was what I was going to say.
Susan. I'm just pandering to Susan. You all know that.
If we can keep our answers under 2 minutes, we do not have to hear the timer go off. All right, on that. The next question, still a little bit about the medical field.
Yeah.
And this probably is a U.S. issue all over the United States. What do you think can be done by the government to make drugs more affordable? And I speak as an older person who was prescribed a drug that was $1,000 a month after my Medicare paid. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Well, the answer to this one for me is pretty short and sweet. We have to elect a new generation of leaders to Congress who aren't bought and paid for by insurance companies and big... No clapping! You're gonna get in trouble. That aren't bought and paid for by big insurance and by pharma. Folks, as long as the people who represent us care more about the profits of those companies than they do about the regular, everyday Americans who are living in our districts, we're going to see EpiPens that cost $600. We're going to see my acne medication that costs $200. I only bought it once. But this is, folks, we have to get a new generation of leaders who refuse to be bought and paid for. And then we have to allow Medicare to negotiate with them. This has got to be a top priority. Drug costs are increasing exponentially every year, and you, the people in this room, are feeling the brunt of that.
Thank you. Doug?
Part of the problem is when the cost of bringing a drug to market for some of the really high-tech, amazing drugs that we do have, it might take $1 billion to $1.5 billion for the research, for the time, the 10 to 12 years to get through an FDA process to get that amazing heart medicine or whatever the type might be to market. And then, how many of you watch the news and you see one ad for a drug where they talk about the drug for about 10 seconds and they spend the next 80 seconds talking about all the ways it's going to kill you? Yeah. Now, I can't stand watching or even listening to those ads. So maybe less ads might be one thing, or at least don't have to have the lawyers have to do all that disclaimer. Because you know what, at the end of the day, you and the doctor are going to decide anyhow. You don't need a commercial to tell you if you take this drug or not. But that said, FDA makes it very difficult to bring one to market. And then we have other countries getting away scot-free, riding the backs of our patents in this country. The patent is very valuable on when that drug has come to market, gone through all that rigorous process to get there, and yet other countries can sell it for a few bucks versus what we have to pay here. Those other countries, we need to set up a process where they have to pay a bigger proportionate share to enjoy the same things that are innovated here. In California, there's a large industry in Southern California that innovates this. And that way, we can have the affordability that people want and deserve to have these amazing chemicals brought forth so they can use them in order to stay alive, to stay in less pain, or just to live ordinary lives. And so the process really means, on the regulatory side, the cost of bringing the drugs to market, and have other countries not be able to get off getting them so cheap just because they have regulations that say, well, we import these American drugs, we're going to tell you how much you can charge for them.
Thank you. Watch that timer. So the next question is almost on the same lines, but slightly different. One of the groups in the United States that is most faced with poverty is older adults. And so I'll define older adults as those people 62 years and older. How are we going to manage our Social Security system, our Medicare system, so that we can take care of those people who have put a lot of money into the system as well?
Well, the cornerstone of that is, first, we don't touch Social Security for people that are already in the system or near it. But we do have to be very sober about how it's going to be sustainable long term. We see that in not that many years from now, it's going to go upside down with the number of people that are paying into it versus those that are drawing from it. It's going to be in a bad way. And so we have to determine that the benefit is sustainable long term, so that people that are counting on it will not find themselves having the rug pulled out from under them that are already in the system. But it also means that people, the younger generation, they don't have any faith that the Social Security system is going to be there for them when it's their turn. And so what options should they have? Should they have an option to be able to go their own direction with investing in their own 401ks? There's other entities that are already exempt from being in the Social Security system. Maybe there should be a broader one. But still, we have to keep maintaining the flow there so that those that are in it and are counting on it aren't left short. So it's really, I know it's like a third rail issue when you talk about it. Oh my gosh, you're going to take Social Security. And then we hear, again, I get hit with that when we talk about doing anything in Congress where, we talked about the Tax Reform Act. Well, that must mean you're going to take it out of Social Security. Nothing could be further from the truth. It doesn't touch it in any way. Now, what it means is that people are going to have more dollars in their pocket from keeping their money to begin with, and we're seeing the economy rebounding in a strong way because of that, because they're investing, small businesses are investing, and people are seeing $2,000 to $2,500 more they're keeping in taxes, as well as the people they work for are giving bonuses, are giving raises, and they're bringing jobs back home. So that's the positive. So if we can keep the positive flow going on that, we can continue to fund Social Security and work our way out of this problem we have, because we should not be tapping into that. And the amount of debt that's been taken by the federal government over the years is actually shameful out of the Social Security system.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Audrey?
So folks, we have a duty. We have a duty as Americans to protect the most vulnerable among us, especially our seniors. Social Security has reduced elderly poverty from 35% in our country to 10%, but we still have a lot of work to do. A quarter of you depend on Social Security. Currently, under the system right now, it'll be solvent for until 2037, and that, as the congressman mentioned, concerns me as a young person, right? There has to be something we can do. And guess what? There is. The wealthiest 1% are not paying their fair share into the Social Security system. And if we raise the cap, If we eliminate the cap on Social Security, the studies have shown that it will be solvent for a long time. But besides just that, folks, our Social Security Administration, their budgets have been under attack. Right here up the road in Reading, the office right there has 14 empty desks. In the past 5 years, we've lost 4,000 people who work for the Social Security Department, administration. And what that means for you, the people with white hair in this room, that means it's harder for you to get your benefits. It's hard to calculate. You shouldn't have to go online to figure out your benefits. This is life or death for you. You should get to go into an office, talk to a person, look at them in the eye who cares about you to make sure that you are getting the maximum benefits that you are allowed to so you can live and retire in dignity. I will fight for Social Security, and that is a promise.
Thank you, Audrey. No clapping, please. The next question, also sort of a nationally based question. What are the best uses of public lands, such as our national forests, national monuments, wildlife refuges, BLM lands, Bureau of Land Management lands, I should say?
I am such a big fan of public lands. My favorite thing to do when I'm not watching Giants baseball and sipping on a lovely glass of bourbon is to be hiking and backpacking in the mountains with my sisters. And in our part of the world, in our district, we have so many beautiful public lands. We have to be able to manage our public lands for multi-benefits, right? For recreation and tourism. For sustainable timber and logging when it's important, right? We have to manage them to make sure that they're not a fire risk. We've got to be able to graze on our public lands to make sure that our cattle ranchers can be part of the solution. When we manage for multiple benefits, we can not only make the most out of our public lands, but we can also tackle some really important problems like climate change. If we're rotationally grazing cattle on public lands, if we're making sure we've got big old-growth forests that are sequestering carbon into the soil, we'll actually be able to mitigate the life-threatening climate change that we see. But there's also challenges, right? I keep talking about Modoc County because I love it up there, but 80% of Modoc County is public lands. They've got no tax base. The sheriff I mentioned only has $3 million a year to run his county jail and run all of his public safety operations. The schools are strapped. So we as a federal government, when you send me there, we need to do our duty to our counties that have big public lands to make sure that they're not suffering, that their lives aren't made harder, because they're hosting the place where the rest of the state and the rest of the nation and world comes to play and recreate. So our public lands are beautiful, they're complex, and I will always fight to protect them.
Thank you. Doug?
Giants baseball, huh?
Yeah.
We'll go there.
Hey, we agree.
All right. Would you restate the question, please?
What are the best uses of public lands, such as the national forests, national monuments, wildlife refuges?
Okay, gotcha. Best uses are having the people be involved with them. What we see more and more is they're being gated off, closed off, roads removed, and people can't go out and hike, hunt, or fight fire because the roads are disappearing. It takes an act of Congress to replace a culvert on a rural forest road because you have to study it to death for a year to replace a culvert. You need a NEPA piece of paper. So if they're not being managed by the federal government, then let somebody else do it. Because we've had enough evidence in 2018 with forestry, and I harken back to 2008. That was a bad year too, especially up in Trinity, but all these years are getting bad. How much of the Pacific Crest Trail has been torched now because of all this, whether in the south or up here in the north, where people would like to be enjoying that? It's going to be scarred for years. So for those that love the outdoors, we also need to be able to do a light touch on them to manage them so they remain safe, so it's good habitat, so that we can have a sustainable forestry situation and not have them all cut off. Every time they declare another national monument, like in Utah, for example, it isn't just an area where you might have a particular set of archaeological sites or an old growth area. They do 1.3 million acres at a time, which means hands off, whether it's wilderness or monument. And so that means you don't get to go in there anymore, whether it is for firefighting, whether it is for forest thinning, forest management, or other things that are beneficial that for our economy, for energy, all those things. So we need to be able to have a light touch as people in those areas in order to manage them and enjoy them. Because as it is, the more gates they put up, the more off-roaders that can't go out, the more hunters, hikers, whoever. It's just taken away what belongs to the people and put it into the hands of few that aren't managing them well in many cases to begin with.
Thank you. The next question, do you accept the scientific consensus that human activities contribute to climate change, yes or no? And what should we be doing to combat what we do appear to have substantial climate change?
Well, do you want to solve the question for, is climate change cyclical? And what percentage of it might be caused by human activity versus cycles anyway? So when you want to talk about the amount of CO2 and pollutants that have been released by nearly 1 million acres of forest burning just this year in California versus the efforts we're doing by getting in a tinier and tinier car and driving less, or being forced into living in communities where you have to walk to work, even though we live in a spread out area up here. That's what comes out of Sacramento. That's what comes out of Washington, D.C. when you talk about things like, Agenda 21, or things like these other issues that are coming with forcing people to how to use their property, how to manage their land, how to build the next buildings. Because we don't even have the land these days to be able to build new homes because it's so highly regulated. So it's highly frustrating for people to have to conform to something that really is a moving target. And so when they say it's a consensus, it's not a consensus. But what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about the effects of that? Are we going to build water storage as temperatures do get warmer in the cycles they do? Are we going to manage the timberlands as those temperatures, if they do change in a natural cycle? Or are we going to do nothing about it? So far I'm seeing a lot of nothing. It's been very difficult to make up for the lack of snowpack when it turns into rain instead, and the water all rushes out because we don't have places to store it. And when our forests, as they become more and more overcrowded with too many trees per acre, creating in essence kind of their own drought because there's too many trees per acre in conditions that might be cyclically getting warmer, we're not doing anything about that. So I don't accept that it comes down to us all having to pay more taxes and that burden being placed on families to have to pay more taxes for them to dribble away in Sacramento or Washington.
Thank you. Audrey?
So even if we stopped using all fossil fuels today around the world, in the next 100 years we would still see life-altering climatic changes. Folks, this is so important. We can't grow cherries in Butte County anymore because we don't have enough chill hours in the winter, right? We're experiencing the most intense tropical storms and hurricanes and we've ever seen. Our forests are burning in larger fires that are hotter, creating their own weather than we've ever seen before. The scientific community has come to consensus about it. What do we do about it? California's cap and trade program has shown that we don't have to do either or. We don't have to stop climate change at the expense of the economy. California's economy is the 5th largest economy in the world. Every year, cap and trade program gives us has the potential to give us $2.5 to $5 billion to combat climate change. Some of my most favorite projects to talk about that we can do involve land management, involve how we sequester atmospheric carbon into the soil, because it's not enough to cap emissions. We have to start actively working on carbon drawdown. And we can, as farmers and ranchers, be on the front line of this. We can keep our soil covered. We can reduce tillage. We can make sure that we're investing in storing our soil carbon. I got 30 seconds. When I get talking about carbon sequestration, it gets weird. But we can make federal policies like California's Healthy Soils Initiative that are actively working to mitigate our climate change, that help farmers be more profitable. And we can do the same sorts of programs in our federal forests. So there's a ton we can do on this. I've worked a lot in climate change mitigation, and I would love to talk more about all you with specific policy things, but my time's up.
Okay. But your time isn't really up.
It's starting on my turn.
We actually only had one question about international affairs, which of course is part of the job. What is your view on the Israeli-Palestine conflict? In 2 minutes.
Yeah,
That would
this
be a
is great.
2-minute question.
This is the only
Just saying.
foreign affairs question.
Yep. Well,
Okay.
I hate to tell you, folks, but we're getting close to closing down here.
What?
Unless you guys want to stay
We'll keep
another
going.
half hour.
We'll go another
you know?
2 hours. All right, so I could try to solve the most complex geopolitical issue in the world in 2 minutes. But for me, what this question and what foreign affairs really comes down to is America's role in the world, right? Who do we want to be? When I signed my statement of candidacy, I got to take the pledge of the office for which I am applying. And that pledge is to support and protect the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of California from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And right after I took that pledge, I started thinking back to my grandfather's generation who fought in World War II. And after they fought the most atrocious war in human history, they came to the conclusion that promoting democracy and liberty and freedom around the world was the best way to keep our people safe at home, right? And so I want to live in an America that once again takes up the mantle of human rights, takes up the mantle of promoting democracy, liberty, and freedom in countries around the world. I want to stand up to authoritarianism. I want to stand up to tyranny and despots, right? I want to fully fund our State Department and make sure they are on the front lines of diplomacy. I want to make sure that we're using all of our economic might and weight to ensure democracy and freedom around the world. I want to make sure that we're fulfilling our commitments with our multilateral institutions. And I want to make sure that we're using military intervention as a last resort. Folks, it is time for America to take back its moral mantle of leadership around the world. I'm going to say no and reject this isolationist policy that we are trending towards.
Thank you very much. Doug? The question, what is your view on the Israel-Palestine conflict?
Prime Minister Netanyahu, a while back, was quoted saying that if the Arab world would put aside their arms, there would be peace. If the Israelis put aside their arms, there would be no Israel. No war if the Arabs laid theirs down, no Israel if the Israelis laid theirs down. Now that's a pretty telling thought here, because Israel is the beacon of freedom, of representative republic in the Middle East. People want to live there. Even the Arab Israelis there, they wouldn't go somewhere else. They've been asked, they've been polled. No, we like it here. People take care of each other in Israel. So I am a firm 100% supporter of Israel, and I always will be. So for us to do anything otherwise, and I'm so grateful that in this new administration, they've made that a firm commitment to our ally, to our friend, to the amazing innovators that they are over in that country. We share so much technology on medical innovation, on agricultural, water saving, with desalination, arms, all the technology that helps them to exist. We also benefit from in partnership. So what better partner could you have? They're loyal to us, we need to remain loyal to them. Now, can a peace solution be found? Well, if both sides want to come to a table and actually achieve that peace, which can be done actually fairly simply by not launching rockets into a free country that then, after they're done picking up, actually helps the other side with patching up their people with medical supplies and sending them aid and all that sort of thing. What is the reward Israel has had for deeding over the Gaza Strip? And why would they give any more over when their avowed motivation by time's up. You know where I'm going with that. Anyway.
Thank you so much. Folks, we're going to run over just a tad this evening. This is the last question, then we'll have closing. And the last question is, tell me how you plan in the next 2 years to be available to your constituents. That's a good question, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I see I'm going to have to put some new tires on one of my vehicles there to get around the district. But that's I think, been one of my hallmarks, is that we are very visible and available in the district to get around and see people. Well, if people can behave, right? So we all ask for a positive civil discourse when we meet with people. And one-on-one in small groups, it works out pretty well. Yeah, I hear the laughing, but the town halls haven't been so productive sometimes. I used to really like to do them a lot, and we'll try them again. But if people don't want to be civil, then you're not going to have that kind of discourse. With that said, my staff, my team is very available, as am I, as much as the 2,538 United Airline miles allow twice a week. But I come home just about every single weekend to be with my family and with my constituents. I think it's important. And Washington, D.C. is a great place, but it ain't that great all the time to be there all the time. And it really comes down to representation is being in proximity to the people. And that's what I've always strived for. So we'll continue to do that. It's really just a matter of getting in the car and getting out there. There is 11 counties, and it's a pretty vast district, one of the larger ones in the country. And so it isn't always easy to get around to those far reaches, but I place great value on that. As a state legislator, when I wasn't as far away all the time, I did a heck of a lot of it then too. So I hope that people will see and recognize that that's who I am, and that's what we'll continue to do so. And there's the other mediums as well. Now we have the telephone town halls. A lot of you receive those calls. So I think that's a pretty good medium. People tell me they like it a lot because you can stay at home in your pink bathrobe with the fuzzy slippers and be part of a town hall without having to go out in the cold or the weather and like that. And we can ask and answer questions and things like that. So whether it's a town hall in person, a telephone town hall, or you sign up for our emails and all that, we want to have that interactivity, and we'll continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Audrey?
So I gotta be real honest. Up until late last year, I had no intention of being in the political life. I have a great job, I have a great life, and the only reason I'm on this stage is I care about you. And in order for me to try to fulfill my mandate to make your life a little bit better, I need to hear what's going on with you and what your problems are. Some of my core values are authenticity, transparency, accessibility, and I fully intend to live into those as your Congresswoman. And when I don't, I expect you to call me out on that. Oftentimes, my social media team will give out my cell phone number on Facebook when people get really heated and they're like, what about this, what about this? And people call me. And we hash it out for 30 minutes, and we find those nuggets of shared common values, right? I've learned a lot through those exchanges. January 3rd, after you inaugurate me, we are gonna have a district-heavy staff. My staff members, I'm looking at a couple of them right now, are gonna be everywhere. They're gonna be in your face. And the fact of the matter is, I know you're not gonna agree with me at all times. I know I'm gonna make mistakes. I know I'm not gonna live up to it. I know I'm gonna have an idea and you're gonna have an idea. I know that you are gonna be protesting outside of my office at various times. And when you do, my staff and I are gonna show up with some coffee and invite you to come in and sit at a table with us. We wanna hear from you. We wanna hear what you need. We wanna represent all of you. I don't care if you're a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian, no party preference, American Independent, I don't care who you are. I am so ready to move beyond partisan labels and just look at people for people and try to figure out how we can make our federal government work for us better. And that is the kind of representative, that's the kind of leader that I'm striving to be for you.
Thank you. Please. So now we're going to move to the closing comments. I'm going to give each of you 3 minutes to kind of wrap it all up. I would add that if either of you wants to have a town hall, I'm available in Reading. I see the League of Women Voters from Butte County, Nevada County, Plumas County, all here. So we'll be happy to help.
And great hosts you are. Is it my turn? I'm going to sweat through my blazer.
We're going with the rules today.
The congressman's going to pass out because my BO is so bad. It's rough.
It is very, I will say, it is very warm up here. Mm-hmm. Just very warm. Please, 3 minutes?
3 minutes. All right, folks, I hope you've gotten a chance to understand a little bit about me over the past 90 minutes, but I know I'm looking out at a lot of folks, and we feel forgotten up here. We feel left behind up here, because we have been. But we don't have to be, right? We don't have to be. This November, we get a choice. We have a choice to make about the kind of district that we want to be, the kind of people we want to be, the kind of communities we want to be. Do we want to be communities that support the Modoc County Sheriff in making sure his 44-bed jail isn't full of people who need treatment? Do we want to make sure that school superintendent can hire a counselor and a social worker to take care of those little kiddos? Do we want to make sure that all of our veterans get the wraparound services that they need and deserve? Do we want to make sure that our seniors can retire in dignity and don't have to choose between top ramen and other super cheap food that college students eat? Yeah, we want to make sure that you're taken care of, right? We have a choice to make about the kind of district we want to be. We have a choice to make about the kind of representation that we want. Do we want to elect a representative who's been bought and paid for by corporate PACs and special interests, or do we want to elect a representative who has said no to that funding? Because that person only wants to be accountable to you, the people in the district, whether you vote for me or not, right? But most importantly, folks, we have the choice to determine what kind of country we want to live in. We have the choice to determine what kind of America we want to be. Are we going to resign ourselves to fear and to polarization? Or are we going to lean into the best of American ideals, our highest aspirations of our founding fathers and mothers, that make sure we're promoting liberty and democracy around the world, right? That make sure we're taking care of the most vulnerable among us and making sure that we are providing equality and justice for all.
Thank you. You may clap. Okay. Stop now. Thank you. Mr. LaMalfa.
That was a good Nixon pose there, Susan.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. Well, again, thank you for attending here tonight and doing your civic service as well and seeing what we are about. You've had a chance to hear from both of us, and we see some overlapping thoughts, but we see some different thoughts as well. And mine comes back to is that I think the opportunities that make this country great came from individuals innovating and groups innovating and not coming from Washington, D.C. or Sacramento, yet another heavy hand of government. And when you get to have a chance to define for yourselves what it is you wish to do with what you've earned, which we know that's hard to earn and it's hard to keep. And I think about that all the time as government spends and spends and spends, because this comes from the sweat of your brow. And so we have to be good stewards with your resources, whether it's your money or our natural resources or our people resources. So we need to defend our borders. We need to defend our interests as a nation. We need to stand firm with our allies, whether that's NATO, Israel, Japan, etc., and project the strength that America always has done around the world that has waned in recent years until now. As your representative, it's been an honor for me. If you choose me again for 2 more years, we'll continue to redouble that effort, because what matters most to you here in this part of the state is that, yes, we are outgunned by the urban areas. We feel it all the time. We have very few representatives in this part of the country compared to the other part of the state with the urban areas, and that's kind of the same all across the country. So we have to battle to have our rural voices heard And I stand for and represent that rural voice in Washington, D.C. And I want my voice to be magnified beyond just one member of Congress. And I think we accomplished that, working in partnership. I sit as a member of the Ag Committee, Natural Resource Committee, and the Transportation Committee, all things that are key elements to what we need to have improved and make our part of this district stronger. Now, we've seen an amazing rebound to the economy and the numbers of unemployment lower nationally, but we haven't quite seen the full effect here. Yes, there's more money in your pocket here locally. Things are starting to happen, but I want it to reach the far areas of all of our district here, the small towns, so we have those opportunities. So again, it's not what government can provide, it's what we can allow ourselves to do, because the answers don't always come from government, but it comes from one people united under God. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so you all have been an absolutely terrific audience. Thank you very, very, very much. You have made my job easy today, and I have to say I came in here with trepidation. Big hand for both candidates before you leave.